before the headlines, before the boardrooms, before the billions, there was only one thing that defined Bill Gates: a quiet, tireless hunger for knowledge. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy, he wasn't chasing approval. He was chasing understanding. While others played outside, Gates stayed inside, locked into books, algorithms, ideas. This wasn't normal curiosity. This was a calling. He didn't want to know what worked, he wanted to know why it worked. His obsession wasn't for fame or grades, it was for mastery. Born in a steady, supportive Seattle home, Gates wasn't surrounded by struggle, but his greatest challenge was internal. His mind moved faster than the world around him, and instead of slowing down, he sped up. He devoured complex material far beyond his age. His early years weren't filled with crowds, they were filled with silence, thinking, coding, and discovery. He wasn't trying to fit in, he was building something no one else could see. That vision came alive the first time he touched a computer terminal. While the rest of his generation barely understood what a computer could do, Bill Gates felt something. To others, it was a machine. To him, it was a future waiting to be shaped. That teletype terminal wasn't just technology, it was transformation. He became addicted to solving problems, writing code, and breaking past limitations. And while most people ran from the unknown, Gates ran straight toward it. Even in high school, he wasn't waiting for opportunity, he was creating it. He teamed up with his brilliant friend Paul Allen, and together they began building, testing, even hacking, not for chaos, but for understanding. They weren't trying to be rebellious. They were trying to learn faster than time itself, and that's what made Gates different. He didn't need applause to keep going, he needed purpose. The average student studies to pass. Bill Gates studied to master. The average person dreams of weekends. Gates dreamt of building empires. And every step, every error, every breakthrough in that lab pushed him closer to the belief that software, this invisible language, could run the entire world. People didn't understand his obsession. But genius rarely looks normal when it's growing. Obsession is lonely, it's inconvenient, but it's where greatness is born. When Gates got to Harvard, it wasn't because he was searching, it was because he was already becoming. But even Harvard couldn't contain him for long. He saw the moment coming, a revolution in personal computing, and he wasn't about to watch it pass him by. When he and Paul Allen saw the Altair 8800 on the cover of a magazine, they knew, this is it. They reached out to the company without having finished the software and promised it was ready. That kind of faith isn't arrogance, it's alignment. When you know your vision, you act before you're ready. You leap while others wait. That leap birthed Microsoft. And here's the truth, leaving Harvard wasn't failure, it was focus. Gates wasn't walking away from education, he was walking into destiny. From that point forward, his life was a storm of strategy, software, and sleepless nights. He wasn't chasing wealth. He was chasing dominance in a space nobody else even believed in. He memorized code line by line. He worked 16-hour days. He held his team to impossibly high standards because he held himself to even higher ones. He wasn't there to impress. He was there to build a revolution. But it all began with a quiet boy in a computer lab, typing into the future. And that's the real lesson here. Greatness doesn't begin with noise. It begins with obsession, with vision, with sacrifice. You don't need the world to believe in you. You just need to not quit. Gates didn't explode onto the scene. He coded his way into history line by line, day by day, silently, relentlessly. And when the world finally noticed, it wasn't because he shouted the loudest. It was because his work roared louder than words ever could. So if you feel alone in your passion, if no one understands your obsession, if your vision makes you seem different, you're not broken. You're becoming. Keep going. Stay quiet. Stay focused. Stay building. Because one day the world will look back and realize they were watching another Gates. Quiet, unshaken, unstoppable. Every generation has a moment, a single point in time where something shifts, where the air changes, where the game tilts, where the door to the future cracks open. For most people, that moment passes by unnoticed. But a rare few, they feel it, they see it before it arrives, they sense the wave before it forms. Bill Gates was one of those rare few. He didn't wait for the future to happen to him, he built it, line by line, code by code, decision by decision. By the time he stepped into Harvard, Bill wasn't searching for his purpose. He was nurturing it. He walked among some of the brightest minds in the world, yet still felt an urgency to outthink the moment. While others celebrated their admission, Gates kept his head low, his pace sharp, and his eyes fixed on the horizon. He wasn't just a student of school, he was a student of the world. And the world was starting to change. In January of 1975, that shift arrived. On the cover of Popular Electronics was a beige metal box, the Altair 8800, a clunky, unassuming, personal computer that the average reader would dismiss as a geek's gadget. But Gates wasn't average. He didn't just see a hobbyist tool, he saw the beginning of an era. He saw potential wrapped in wires, possibility hiding inside that machine. He saw a universe of personal computing, one in every home, every office, every pocket. It was ridiculous to everyone else, but not to Gates. And what he did next, that's what separates dreamers from doers. Gates and Paul Allen contacted MITS, the company behind the Altair, and told them they had written a basic interpreter for the machine, but they hadn't, not yet. They didn't have access to the Altair, they didn't have hardware. All they had was belief, brains, and obsession. In the following weeks, Gates locked himself away in a computer lab and pushed through endless hours of coding. He ate little, he slept less, but he coded with surgical intensity. Every keystroke was a gamble, every hour was a sacrifice. And when the time came to test the interpreter on the real machine, it worked. Against all odds, it worked. That was no accident. That was the result of obsession. Because Gates wasn't hoping, he wasn't gambling. He was obsessed. An obsession rewires everything. It makes the impossible possible. While opportunity knocks for the average, obsession breaks the door down. That was the moment that shifted everything. MITS agreed to license the software. The doors of Microsoft creaked open, not with glory, not with press releases, but with quiet confidence and uncompromising focus. The empire hadn't been built yet, but the foundation was real. The spark had caught fire, and then came the decision that most people call crazy. Bill Gates dropped out of Harvard. Too many. That's failure. But Gates didn't drop out to quit. He dropped out to focus. There's a difference. Quitting is walking away from fear. Focusing is walking into your calling. Gates wasn't afraid of school. He just knew that school couldn't teach him what the future was about to demand. That's the second lesson of his mindset. When obsession becomes your compass, the traditional path becomes optional. You stop living for approval, you start living for results. And results demand sacrifice. In the early days of Microsoft, Bill wasn't the billionaire CEO you see today. He was a skinny, nerdy kid writing software in a small office, pulling all night, eating bad food, and working like his life depended on it because it did. He wasn't interested in a work-life balance. He was interested in dominating the software industry. He worked 7 days a week. He expected perfection. He memorized every line of code. Nothing slipped past him. He had tunnel vision, not because he was cold, but because he was consumed. His obsession wasn't with money, it was with possibility. He didn't just want to sell programs. He wanted to shape how people lived, learned, worked, and connected. He wanted to make software the soul of modern civilization. And the truth is, most people can't stomach that kind of intensity. That kind of focus. It makes you different. It makes you misunderstood. But that's the price of building the future. You have to be willing to look insane before the world catches up. The young Gates understood that, and he embraced it. He read technical manuals like novels. He micromanaged every project. He argued, he demanded, he challenged. He was intense not for the sake of being controlling, but because he believed the stakes were higher than anyone else did. And he was right. As the personal computer began to explode in popularity, companies started racing for market share. But Gates was playing a different game. While others competed for hardware, he chased the operating system, the soul of the computer, the invisible layer that no one saw but everyone used. That's where his obsession lived. In the unseen. Microsoft's breakthrough came when Gates struck a deal with IBM to supply an operating system for their upcoming PC. But here's the genius. Gates didn't have the OS. Yet again, he took a bold risk. He found an existing product, QDOS, purchased the rights, rebranded it as MS-DOS, and handed it to IBM. But he didn't sell it. He licensed it. That one decision, a licensing agreement instead of an outright sale, became the billion-dollar move. It allowed Microsoft to retain ownership and license the software to countless other manufacturers. Gates didn't just build software, he built a model, one that scaled, duplicated, and dominated. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a fluke. This was obsession at work, vision meeting timing with execution. And as Microsoft grew, Gates refused to slow down. While his competitors focused on products, he focused on platforms. While they chased sales, he chased ecosystems. He wasn't thinking about winning the year. He was thinking about owning the next decade. That's what obsession does. It elevates your sight line. It pushes you beyond the obvious. It forces you to see 5 moves ahead when others are stuck on the board. But obsession has a cost. Gates became known as demanding, ruthless, intense. He pushed his employees hard. He wasn't always easy to work with. But greatness is rarely comfortable. It's forged through fire. And Gates didn't want comfort, he wanted clarity, execution, dominance. And it worked by the mid-1980s. Microsoft was a software juggernaut, and Bill Gates, still in his 30s, was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in history. But that wasn't the goal, that wasn't the reward. The reward was knowing that his obsession, this relentless drive to reshape the world through code, was becoming real. But let's not forget the journey, because this chapter isn't about success. It's about obsession. The kind of obsession that made him skip meals, lose sleep, challenge norms, drop out of the most prestigious university on earth, and throw himself into uncertainty with full force. You don't get that kind of life by dabbling. You get it by committing, all in. No plan B, and that's what separates the legends from the rest. Opportunity comes to many, but only the obsessed know what to do when it arrives. There's a moment in every journey when talent isn't enough, a moment when ideas fade, dreams blur, and only one thing remains: work. While the world applauded the idea of a digital revolution, Bill Gates had no time to wait for applause. He was too busy building the infrastructure of the future, 1 hour at a time, one line of code at a time, one meeting, one challenge, one storm at a time. Because Gates understood what most people never do: success doesn't live in comfort. It lives in the grind. Microsoft wasn't built on brilliant ideas alone. It was built on a battlefield of relentless execution. In the early 1980s, the world was just beginning to understand what computers could mean to the average person. Businesses were curious. Consumers were hesitant. Investors were cautious. But Gates, he was obsessed. He had seen the future years before, and now he was sprinting to catch up with his own vision. And that meant working glamorous, unforgiving, and unending. Bill Gates wasn't your typical executive. He didn't lead with charisma. He didn't manage with charm. He led with intensity. He expected brilliance, not occasionally but always. His mind worked like a machine, fast, precise, and endlessly active. He didn't walk into meetings to hear ideas. He walked in to challenge them. Employees at Microsoft tell stories of Gates reviewing lines of code, finding flaws, asking impossible questions, and demanding better, always better. He was known for interrupting, debating, disagreeing, not because he wanted control, but because he couldn't settle for average. He wasn't running a company, he was building a legacy, a future, a new world. And when you're building that future, the clock becomes irrelevant. Most people work by the hour. Gates worked by the mission. Days blurred, nights evaporated, time stopped existing. The only thing that mattered was progress. There were no weekends, no after hours. Work was the rhythm, the obsession, the only path forward. And that's the first lesson of this chapter. If you want to outbuild the world, you must outwork the clock. There's no shortcut to mastery. There's no hack for vision. There's only the grind, the disciplined, deliberate, daily grind. Gates wasn't the kind of leader who gave motivational speeches. He led through example, through force of will. He expected the same from others because he demanded the most from himself. When others said this is good enough, Gates asked, is it scalable? When others said, we're done, Gates said, where's version 2? When others were proud, Gates was already restless. And yet, he wasn't chasing money. He was chasing impact. Impact that required precision, perfection, and persistence. Behind the scenes, Microsoft was growing, but it wasn't smooth. There were bugs, competition, delays. There were long meetings, internal arguments, strategic risks. But through it all, Gates held the line. He knew what few understand. The grind doesn't stop when it gets hard. That's when it begins. And while others burned out, gave up, or backed off, Gates turned up the heat. Not because he didn't feel pressured, but because pressure sharpened him. It fueled him. It became his environment. You see, Gates didn't fight for balance, he fought for breakthroughs. And sometimes, breakthroughs demand that you go so deep into your craft that the world fades away. He built routines around productivity. He shielded his attention. He lived in a fortress of focus. And in that fortress, Microsoft released one success after another: MS-DOS, Windows, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Office. Each product wasn't just software, it was a statement, a declaration of dominance, a display of Gates' refusal to slow down. But here's the truth most people ignore. The cost of greatness is exhaustion. Bill Gates didn't live a balanced life. He lived a mission-driven life. And every second of it was spent building, refining, sharpening, winning. He worked late. He read everything. He knew the market, the tech, the people, the code. He lived in his mind, in the future, in possibility. And because of that, Microsoft didn't just lead, it redefined the game. By the 1990s, Microsoft was a giant. Windows had taken over the PC world. Bill Gates was a billionaire, but none of it changed him. He still asked the hardest questions. He still devoured books and technical reports. He still arrived early and stayed late. Because success hadn't softened him, it had sharpened his edge. He didn't let winning make him lazy. He let it make him hungrier. Because that's what lions do. They don't sleep because they've eaten. They sharpen their teeth for the next hunt. And Gates, he was always hunting for better products, better ideas, better systems, better leadership. And that leads to the next truth. Genius doesn't stop when it wins. It reinvents itself. Bill Gates didn't let Microsoft sit on one success. He expanded. He acquired. He challenged. He knew the tech world would change fast. He was determined to stay ahead. He didn't just fight competitors, he fought complacency. Every single day while the world praised him, he was already questioning everything. That's the mark of real success. Not getting to the top, staying ahead of the fall. Gates never saw success as a finish line. He saw it as fuel, not an excuse to slow down, but a reason to evolve. And yet, despite all the growth, despite all the power, he never forgot what got him there. The work, the grind, the hours no one saw, the silence that forged the roar. And that's where you, the listener, need to lean in, because maybe you're in your grind right now. Maybe you're putting in the hours and not seeing the results. Maybe no one is clapping yet. Maybe your world feels small, tiring, endless. But let me remind you, that's what greatness feels like when it's growing. It doesn't feel glamorous. It feels exhausting. But that exhaustion, that's your muscle building. That's your focus sharpening. That's your legacy forming. Bill Gates didn't win because he was lucky. He won because he worked when no one else would. And you can too. You don't need to be the smartest. You don't need to be the loudest. You just need to outwork the clock, day by day, hour by hour, until the world has to pay attention. So if you're tired, if you're grinding, if you're wondering whether the work is worth it, let Bill Gates remind you, the future belongs to those who build it, or the world sleeps. When you think of dominance, you picture noise, loud wins, bright lights, headlines, screaming victory. But Bill Gates played a different game. His greatest moves were silent. His biggest wins, invisible until they were already untouchable, because real power doesn't need to announce itself. Real power is quiet. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't need applause. It just executes. By the time Microsoft began shaping the personal computing era, Gates had already mastered the art of strategic silence. He didn't fight with noise. He fought with preparation. He didn't compete by shouting louder. He competed by thinking deeper. That's what the world often forgets. Gates didn't waste energy on distractions. He poured everything into architecture, business architecture, software architecture, mental architecture, because he understood something very few people ever do. If your foundation is stronger than the storm, nothing can break you. While other CEOs gave speeches and smiled for the cameras, Gates was in war rooms with his engineers, diving into every update, every version, every flaw, not to micromanage, but to master the terrain. He didn't want to just lead. He wanted to understand everything beneath his empire, and that obsession gave him an edge no one could match. Because it wasn't just about working hard, it was about thinking harder. Gates wasn't reactive, he was anticipatory. While others solved today's problems, Gates was designing solutions for 5 years ahead. He was building Microsoft not just as a company, but as an ecosystem, a system so deeply woven into the fabric of modern life that removing it would break everything around it. That wasn't luck. That was intentional silence, a long game strategy that very few have the patience to play. And that's the theme of this chapter. Move in silence. Build in silence. Let your results make the noise. In a world obsessed with social media validation, with going viral, with being shown, Bill Gates chose to vanish behind the code, the deals, and the discipline. And while everyone else was chasing visibility, Gates was chasing inevitability. Because when your vision is strong enough, it doesn't matter who notices today. They'll all notice eventually when it's too late to catch up. Gates didn't just want to win the market. He wanted to define it. He didn't just want to sell software. He wanted his software to become the language of business and productivity. Understood that platforms were more powerful than products. That control wasn't about price, it was about placement. So, Microsoft didn't just build apps, they built operating systems, APIs, development environments, the entire foundation. And while Apple and IBM and other players tried to carve space with hardware, Gates doubled down on what couldn't be touched: software, licensing, distribution. Because the invisible is always the most powerful force. People couldn't see Microsoft in the way they saw flashy products, but they felt it every office, every school, every government, every screen, Windows, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook. They weren't just tools, they were defaults. And the brilliance, Gates didn't need to market them as lifestyle brands. He made them unavoidable. That's how silent power works. You don't chase popularity, you engineer permanence. But Gates didn't stop there. His mindset wasn't how can we win this year, it was how can we become essential for the next 50 years. And to do that, he had to stay ahead of disruption. That meant constant reinvention, constant iteration, relentless evolution. He surrounded himself with brilliant minds, not to flatter him but to challenge him, because Gates knew that silent strength wasn't about staying comfortable, it was about staying sharp. Iron sharpens iron, and he built an army of thinkers, coders, strategists, and engineers who could match his pace, challenge his ideas, and fuel his fire. Microsoft under Gates didn't rest on its lead. It expanded, iterated, and crushed everything in its path quietly, and that's what scared competitors. Not how loud Gates was, but how predictably precise he became. He didn't react to moves, he anticipated them. By the mid-1990s, Microsoft was not just winning, it was everywhere. And Gates, he became the richest man in the world. But again, no boast, no flex, just the same soft-spoken man in a sweater, walking into work like it was day one. That's the kind of humility that only real power can afford, because true strength doesn't need to prove anything, it just keeps producing. But here's the part that defines Bill Gates more than wealth. Even at the top, he kept asking, what's next? While others retired or slowed down, Gates accelerated. He started looking beyond tech, beyond screens, beyond markets. He began to ask deeper questions. What's our responsibility as innovators? What legacy do we leave when the software fades? Can this mindset of silent obsession be redirected toward something even bigger? And that question would eventually lead him to one of the greatest pivots in modern leadership history, a journey we'll explore in Chapter 5. But before we move forward, let this settle. You don't need noise to make an impact. You don't need recognition to build a revolution. You don't need the world to see your grind. You just need to keep building. Think bigger, move quieter, and one day, the world will look around and realize everything they're using, everything they depend on was built by someone they never saw coming. Bill Gates didn't just give the world software, he gave it a new way to think. While others measured him by net worth, stock prices, and billionaire rankings, Gates was measuring himself by an entirely different scale: impact, service, and legacy. When the world was amazed by how much wealth he had accumulated, Gates shocked everyone not by retiring, but by stepping into the most powerful phase of his journey, a mission to tackle the world's greatest problems. In 2008, he stepped away from his daily role at Microsoft, not because he was done building, but because he wanted to build something far more meaningful. Along with his wife Melinda, he launched the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, not as a symbol of wealth, but as a weapon against human suffering. This wasn't charity for headlines, it was purpose with precision. He took the same obsessive systems thinking that built Microsoft and applied it to global health, poverty, and education. He poured billions into eradicating polio, combating malaria, improving sanitation, revolutionizing education, and bringing vaccines to the world's most forgotten places. This was not emotional giving, it was calculated compassion. He wasn't just writing checks, he was in the field, in labs, in meetings with scientists and global leaders, challenging systems, funding innovation, and demanding results. He brought CEO-level discipline to the fight against inequality, and it worked. He gave more than $50 billion of his own fortune, but the real value wasn't the money, it was his mindset. Gates proved that the same drive that creates billion-dollar companies can also solve billion-person problems. His mission was simple: no child should die because they were born in the wrong place. No mother should suffer due to poor infrastructure. No brilliant mind should be denied education because of geography. He didn't want to make the rich richer, he wanted to raise the floor for all humanity. And all the while, he remained the same sweater-wearing, book-reading, quiet builder. Even after changing the world once, he continued waking up early, reading voraciously, and thinking about what's next. Because for Gates, obsession didn't end when he reached the top, it just shifted direction. First he changed the digital world, then he started changing the real one. From software to sanitation, from products to people, his impact became deeper, quieter, and more powerful. He taught us that wealth is not the finish line, it's a tool. that success means nothing if it dies with you, and that the true measure of a life isn't what you take but what you give. Bill Gates didn't roar with fame, he whispered, with purpose. And that whisper echoed across every continent. So now the question turns to you: when you win, what will you do next? Will your success be a trophy to display, or a tool to transform someone else's future? Because Gates didn't just succeed, he gave success meaning, and he didn't just change the world once he's doing it still. That's not just ambition, that's legacy.